Hey guys, what is going on? It is xckj here today, bringing to you guys a video about Season 4 draft picks, how to really pick the best team, what is the best team to pick. We kind of talked in prior videos already about how to help out your team by allowing them to comfort pick. So, for instance, you don't always need to have a damage and flank in every single game. Sometimes 2 damages is great if that's what your second person is more comfortable playing. If they're not comfortable playing a flank, don't force them onto a flank when they're really great at playing Victor. Or if you really need an off tank, but they're comfortable playing a point tank, having 2 tanks and kind of having one just hang out in the back and one sit on the point, just not having them stack on each other, it's better than having, like, that ideal perfect pick. But for those of you who really just want to know, hey, what is it that's really good this season? What are some really good teams to draft? What are some really good bands? Well, I want to talk about that right now. So we have right down here all of the champions. I kind of sorted them into tanks, damages, point tanks, off tanks, damages, flanks, and healers. And down at the bottom, we have Octavia down there, but we're not even going to touch her yet because she's not really out. So we're going to be just talking about, who am I banning? Who do I see master players banning? Who do I see high diamond players banning? And what should you be banning? And what should you be playing? And what champions should you be getting good at? Because they're going to be good for a long amount of time. Because we don't want to abuse stuff for one patch. Abusing stuff for one patch is fun and does help you climb, but we want to learn champions that are going to be good in the long run for Season 4 so we can carry ourselves all the way through Season 4, and we'll have a lot of success with those champions. With that being said, guys, before we do jump into the video, I just want to say once we hit 5,000 subscribers, I'm going to be having the one chip challenge. It is the hottest chip on the planet. I'm going to be eating it and then trying to play a casuals Paladins game at the same time. I doubt I'll be able to do it. I'll probably be in tears, probably crying, coughing, choking. Maybe I'll have to run outside. We'll find out, I guess. But with that being said, let's jump right into it. So starting out with bans. So Yagrath is not in the game yet. She possibly will have bans. She'll definitely have a lot of counter picks, so maybe she doesn't need bans because, if you first pick her, you can just pick like Chain Reaction Bomb King and tie her into her. So maybe she just has too many counters to be a bannable champion, if that makes any sense. Right now, personally, I am really enjoying a strategy that I've talked quite a bit about on the stream. Well, before I talk about this like strategy, let's talk about the normal bans, which is Cassie and Zin. I think right now Cassie and Zin are very safe bans. If you are going to have a Grover on your team, or if you're going to be playing Grover, or somebody's going to be playing like Furia, maybe just champions that have like they can get away, but certain. I just really feel like there's some champions that are very exposed to flanks, and so you might think about banning Androxus just because he is so strong. Where's Androxus? Androxus is right here. So these are bans that I would really think about doing. Right now, Mako is not worth the ban like he was last split or at the end of last season. Barrick is definitely worth the ban right now. So if you are having trouble playing against tanks and stuff like that, you can pick Barrick. The only thing is, Barrick is able to get countered. You pretty much can pick Rom into Barrick and you're fine. You can play Tyra into Barrick and you're fine. A lot of champions that have like invincibility, Fernando into Barrick. So he, there's a lot of reasons why not to ban him, but you still want to be conscious. Okay, they have a Barrick on their team. Who's going to be able to deal with the Barrick when he ults a point? Or are we just going to have to back off and concede it? Because that is the reason why Barrick is so strong right now. But people like Rom and people like Terminus, when you just buy Dozer, can just wreck Barrick's ult right away. And that's another thing, when people pick Terminus, and Nara right now is the only point tank I'm not super worried about. She's very strong, but I feel like she kind of just is in the game. She doesn't really have any quirks, if that makes sense. Whereas you have Terminus right here, who you have to be thinking about counter picks when you're playing against Terminus, like Khan, a lot of CC. So with that being said, those are kind of the bans that I see a lot. I see a lot of Terminus bans. I see Androxus bans, Shaolin bans, Cassie bans, just because they're all really strong right now. Other bans on Frog Isles, it's worth considering banning Nessa, and I think that is pretty much everything. Tiberius is really strong right now, although I don't see him getting banned hardly at all. Other than that, that's pretty much. Let me move Barrick up there just so you can visualize this. I think, yeah, and then Nessus sometimes on Frog Isles. I think those are all of the bans right there. Oh, also, we've got Xin right here. Xin seems to get banned pretty often, and rightfully so. His ult is pretty insane. But the only reason why I don't ban Xin over Cassie and Shaolin is because Xin is very strong, and he gets instant kills, and a good Xin will murder your team. But with that being said, Shaolin and Cassie can solo carry games. Like Xin can kill one person, Cassie can easily shred through 3-4 people. Don't get me wrong, good Xin can too, but Xin is definitely up there on the list. So if they've already banned Cassie, you don't really care about Shaolin too much, maybe focus on banning maybe the Terminus and the Xin or the Androxus if you know that somebody's going to be playing like an exposed healer like Grover or Furia, something along those lines. Maybe not Furia, but definitely Grover. Whenever I'm playing Grover and there's an Androxus on the other team, he gives me the hardest time. So let me put all of these back right now, and then we'll talk about some team comps. Put him there. All right, guys, so now let us talk about some solid team comps. So right now, some things we want to think about. Shield meta is very strong. We want one shield on our team, one champion who has some sort of shielding on their team. If we have two shielding on our team, and we can, or even one shielding, if we can force the enemy team to buy Wrecker, that's money that they're not spending on things like Cauterize, on things like Resilience, on things like Haven. So having them want to buy an extra item to try and counter you is good because that takes away from another item slot. Maybe they can't afford Nimble, or they don't have an extra slot for Nimble, you know what I'm saying? So with that being said, we want some sort of shields on our team. So that's why I really think that Barrick is S tier as far as early picks. I think Fernando is like right between A and B tier. I'm not a huge fan of him as a point tank, but people have been playing him and have been doing pretty well with him on point tank. So as far as giving you that shielding, you have the Barrick, you have the Nando, you have Torvald as an option for shields, but I'm not a huge fan of it. Actually, hold on, before I go into that, these are the two champions that I would pick if your point tank needs to give shields. Now, if you're picking for an off tank and you need to give shields, I think Con Shield is not impactful enough to force anyone to buy Wrecker, to be honest. Torvald is kind of underwhelming. I think the only way that you really get the team to potentially buy Wrecker is if you're playing Ruckus, because people want to kill Ruckus faster, so they buy Wrecker to deal with it. You'd be surprised. It happens a lot more than you think. And then, of course, the obvious answer, which is Makoa, and you can pick Ash, but they probably won't pick Wrecker into it, but that's fine. You probably are going to be playing Shoulder Bash, but these are kind of your shielding options to give you some shielding on the team. So let's say your point tank ends up picking a Nara or something like that, and now you can still pick Nando as the off tank also, but so he's good to kind of fill either of the roles. So let's say you have a teammate that picks Nara, you're going to be looking at buying either one of these four options right here. So that is to force them into buying Wrecker. Now, the other item that we really, really love to see is Resil. We want to force the enemy team to buy Resil, and then they can't afford Wrecker, or they try to buy Wrecker, and then they can't counter everything. Crowd control right now in the game is insane, and there is a lot of things forcing people into buying it. The amount of Tremors and Nara that I am seeing this patch is like insanity. And also, guys, Resil really, really helps with Tremors and Nara. I know it doesn't seem like it would, but anyway, let's talk about some champions that force Resil picks. We have Stun Terminus, which I see a lot. This is point tanks, but there is a ton of champions that end up forcing Resil. So we have Terminus, we have Inara, and Barrick doesn't force it. Torvald, not going to force it. Probably just honestly, Torvald right now is kind of in an underwhelming spot. Ash probably won't force it unless you're playing max knockback. Makoa, no. Atlas is going to be forcing a Rezo buy, especially if they want to deal with that rewind. Earth Splitter Rom is going to be forcing it. And then we move over into Stun Con's just bad, so nobody's playing it anymore. Then we're moved on to the damages, but you really have no one here that's going to be forcing those picks. Maeve, possibly, but probably not. But then you go into the healers. Here we go. So Pip as an off tank I think is interesting. I don't see it played that much, so I'm not going to put him on the list. But here is the amazing healers that we have to potentially get them into buying Rezo. Those three healers right there. And I think that is why these three healers are so strong right now. Io doesn't have her stun up enough to really get people into buying it. Like I said, maybe Pip, but people aren't really buying Pip, and possibly Genos, but I usually see people using like their dashes and stuff like that to get out of it. Make sure on your teams that you have at least one champion on your team that's applying crowd control, whether it's a Grover root, whether it's a Damba stun, whether it's a Saris ult, whether it's an Inara, because Inara has Tremors, but even if you're not playing Tremors, because I play Mother's Grace when I play Inara, right, you still have your ult. Atlas with his rewind, Rom with this constantly ulting the enemy team. You got all their champions like Furia, you've got like the slow from Grok and all that kind of stuff that are really good, but to be completely honest, I don't know if it's forcing a Rezo pick, you know what I'm saying? So with that being said, those are like the two items that we're trying to get people to buy, is Rezo and Wrecker, just because it fills up spots. Torvald does force a Wrecker buy pretty much always. I really don't see enemy teams not picking Wrecker into it. But with that being said, and possibly even if he's playing Nullify, you might even see them buying Rezo into it. But I don't know. He's just underwhelming, so that's why I don't have him on the list for any of that stuff. But this is pretty much all stuff that will force the enemy team to end up buying Resilience. Now, the one thing that you want to think of is you don't want to have too much crowd control on your team to the point where once they buy Resil, like your entire team is based around crowd control. So for instance, let's say you have an off-tank Atlas, a point tank Tremor Zanara, and an off-tank Grover Roots, you know, you're going to be a little bit hurt in there. But if it is a Damba, you know, so what? It's fine. But Grover's whole deal is his roots. Like his heal output is strong. It's not as strong as the other healers. His whole thing is the roots. But now everybody's buying Rezel 3, and you're hardly doing anything anyway. And not only that, but it's hurting like a big portion of your team. So try to keep it to like 2 champions doing CC on your team. So with that being said, I don't know. I think that's pretty much what I like to see as far as that stuff. So let's put all of this back over onto the list. And now we're just going to be looking at some solid team comps. So some solid team comps that we have here. We want a decent mix of Haven damage, blast shield damage, stuns, CC, just stun, CC, whatever in general, and a decent amount of shielding. So you kind of, you don't really base it around your point tank, but your point tank does have a lot to do with it. Because, you know, if they're playing Barrick, then you definitely have no CC, but you do have shielding. If you're playing Inara, you have no shielding, but you do have CC. You kind of see what I'm saying there? So a good team that I think is really strong right now. Like if I could pick my absolute ideal team, this is basically what it would be. Tiberius and Cassie are interchangeable in this right here, and possibly even both of them. Off tank, as far as flanks, off tanks, what am I saying? You know, you can interchange either of these, or you can just play a Xin. So we'll just throw this here, and we'll put this up here. And then for our last champion, I'm picking a Grover. This is like kind of my ideal team right here. Instead of Grover, you can always go with like a Saris or a Furia. I don't know. Personally, I just like this because Makoa Hook is great crowd control right here. With that being said, you also have the Grover Roots And then you have a ton of shielding coming from both your champions. Shielding right now is a meta. CC right now is a meta. They're both very, very strong. Wrecker is probably a little bit undertuned. So even if they end up buying a lot of Wrecker, it's kind of a wasted item slot, and it doesn't really do all that much. It does do a lot, don't get me wrong. But do you remember what it used to do? It used to be like nuts. It was like two-shotting things after a while. If you want, you can, interchange the Xin for the Androxus. The damages champions are kind of interchangeable, and you can probably switch out the Grower for the Genos. I really just like that kind of consistent heals over the bursty heals, just because consistent heals beat out Cauterize. That's basically what it is. Let's say you're playing a Furia, right, and they have Cauterize 3. They have Cauterize 3 applied, and then you hit with the Furia heal with Caut 3. You're hardly healing for anything. Now the heals over time, they still are a little bit more impactful. I know the Furia heal lasts more than just like a burst, but you guys get what I'm saying. So this is basically a team that I like here. Some very, very strong counter picks that I already mentioned is, let's say you got Barrick. Counter picks for Barrick. Let's just go over that, because I feel like people aren't banning Barrick. They're kind of just counter picking Barrick. So let me just throw all this stuff down here. Counter picks for Barrick are other tanks, believe it or not, and some damages. You have Tyra, and the reason why Tyra is very strong into Barrick is because she can firebomb the point. Then you also have Terminus. He buys Bulldozer 3 and instant destroys Barrick's ult turret. Then Rom, because he can ult straight through Barrick's ult and then just destroy the whole thing. And you have like Nando, just because he can ult right inside of Barrick's point and kind of just say, hey dude, you just ulted on me and I really don't care. The other reason why I really like Terminus into Barrick, though, he's probably my favorite counter pick for Barrick, is because the shield kind of doesn't really matter. He can kind of just walk right up to Barrick and just start hitting him with his hammer, and it doesn't really matter all that much. Not to mention, stun Terminus is pretty strong and does a decent job on the point. Now, the reason why I like Cassie so much on damage is because she just has good consistent heals. I feel like she's easy to do damage with, or good consistent heals, what am I saying? A good consistent damage, easy to do damage with. She has her rolls. Her roll build is just so strong right now. She can get out of a lot of fights. People, if you're not super great at it, that's fine. You can just be playing the burst Cassie. I can't think what it's called right now, but you know what I'm talking about, the one where the Q does a ton of damage. I don't know why I can't think of it, but anyway, Blast Shot Cassie? No, I don't know. But anyway, you can always be playing that too. I think it's pretty strong. Alright guys, so if you did learn something from the video, make sure to leave a like and sub to the channel. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you learned something. I know it's always fun for me to sit down, kind of look at these champions, kind of think about this stuff, and then once I get into the games, I'm able to apply it a little bit more. So thank you guys for watching all the way to the end. Peace.